Hey, guys! Happy Hump Day, Wednesday. We're definitely on the backside now. It's almost bedtime. It's 8:30 on a Wednesday. Ah, hey, I tell you what, it's hard to argue with the weather. I don't know where you're watching this from, but here in Kentucky, finally the humidity's starting to die down a little bit, and we are grateful for it. Nothing like sitting out on the deck in the 70s with low humidity. It's there's a lot to be grateful for. So I had some messages. It's funny, a lot of these conversations have been, mainly about, you know, responsibility and really leaning into and discovering strengths and gifts and talents and those kinds of things. And um, it's uncomfortable, right? They're uncomfortable conversations to have. They're uncomfortable conversations to even think and consider, even on our own, without anybody else being involved. And just the messages that I get, but very few, always very few comments. But the messages are good, so keep them coming. I'll take it. If that's where you're most comfortable sharing, then I'll take it. But I would encourage you, when you put a comment in or a question in the comments here, it's helpful for other folks too, right? In a couple different ways. One, it's always helpful to know, especially when you're struggling, right? Regardless of how you struggle, whatever the struggle is, it's always great to know that you're not alone, right? Like there's always comfort in knowing that you're not alone in a situation or in a thought process. Not that you need a bunch of people to rally around you and pat you on the back and tell you everything's going to be okay, but just to know that you're not alone when you're struggling with something. That there's an empowering nature and encouraging nature to that. Um, and so, if you've got a question, you've got a comment or something, drop it in there. It's just good for other folks to know that there's other folks that are struggling with the same things or have some of the same questions, and then they feel more encouraged to ask better questions, because that, like, honestly, that's one of the biggest keys, is just learning to ask better questions about the situation, so that it triggers a different thought process, right? Because then when we have different thought processes, we have a different perspective. Different perspective gives us different answers, which gives us a different outcome. So a couple things about yesterday, that I think. So I try to look for like trends, right, in the messages that come in. And so one of the things was about this whole idea about leadership and responsibility there, because yesterday, I had mentioned that, you know I think we have to step back and think about leadership position and the expectation there, right? And here's what I mean by that. It's really easy to be in a position, and all of us generally answer to somebody, regardless of the level of the organization that we're in, right? So if we think about this in a typical kind of organizational hierarchy, you have, the organization itself, and then you have the business unit, right? Again, we're going to go super high level here instead of getting super detailed, but you have the business unit itself. So, generally I kind of think about business again at a super high level in a couple different segments. You got, and for my sales folks, forgive me, but I'm going to group you in with marketing. I definitely recognize they're two completely different functions in the business, but you think sales and marketing, right? You think operations, and you think delivery, right? So, you know, again, broad stroke, broad spectrum. But with that being said, um, you got the organizational level, you got the business unit, right? So within the organization, there's business units, and then within the units, there are teams, right? And then within the teams, teams are made up by individuals, right? So with that being said, excuse me, um, with the good old Kentucky weather comes allergies. So with that being said, frequently, and I think everybody is exposed to this, everybody's aware of this, but generally speaking, how do people ascend through an organization, right? How do people get promoted? How do people, move up the ladder, if that's their desire, right? You're generally good at a skill, right? You're generally good at doing something, a thing, right? And so you kind of specialize in that area. And then if you stay somewhere long enough, right, then eventually you kind of earn your way up. Generalities, right? Don't know that that's the best way. Don't know that it's the right way, but that's generally how it speaks, how it happens, right? So when somebody is in a leadership role, right? Leadership role, titled leadership role. It's easy to assume that when we are a follower, and and there's a lot of merit in becoming and aspiring to be a great follower. That's something that I learned a few years back. Was just really a question of, do you aspire to follow well? And that's a deep question to consider, because there's support and there's intention and there's a heart in that as well, that really needs to be in the right place in order to effectively do that. And so consider that, right? Because again, we all have somebody that we report to um, inside of an organization, if you're inside an organization. And so, with that being said, it's easy to think that just because somebody has a title, that they are also equipped to lead, right? And so, being good in a skill set, in a technical skill, in a specialty area, does not necessarily mean that that individual is also uh, a great leader. Now, they can be, but just the title or just being great in a specific skill doesn't automatically make them a great team leader. And the statistics, I think Gallup said that it's somewhere in the neighborhood. It's in the high 70%. I forget if my colleague Robert Carlson is on here. He'll definitely chime in because he'll know it off heart. But there's a percentage of high 70s, low 80% of people quit as it relates to their leadership styles or leadership ability or inabilities in their direct manager or one level above it, right? Because of that influence on a daily basis. And if there's misalignment there, then frequently engagement goes down. There's a whole host of problems that arise from that, that then the result of that ends up being the individual leaving the organization. But it's generally speaking around that first layer of management above them, or the manager directly above them, right? So um, but when our expectation is because they're in that role, then they should know how to lead. And so we approach conversations, we approach problem solving, we have these unspoken expectations, right? I have a saying to girls, unspoken expectations will always be unmet expectations, right? There's no way for someone to know what your expectations are if they're unspoken, right? And so frequently we believe because somebody's in a position or in a role that they have the ability to actually lead a team of people, and it's a different skill set. That it's one thing to be armed with the knowledge that you need to lead people and that you are responsible for leading people. There he is, that you're responsible for leading people, but it's something very different to be equipped to lead people as well. And just as we were talking about, or have been talking about for several days, about skills, right? About acquiring skills. Leadership is also a skill, like the ability to lead a team of people to a common goal, right? To understand what drives and what motivates your unique team, right? And rally them around a common goal together so that you can get there, right? Get there effectively, um, and to minimize turnover and churn, and keep engagement high and deliver a good, like, all of these things are results of being a great leader. I tend to break it again at a super high level, right? Like managing being the transactional nature of the job, where leading is more the transformational component of the position, right? And so you think about that, the differences in work and how they fall into those two categories. Both are very important. In business, you've got to produce and deliver a product on a consistent basis and in a consistent format, or you don't have a business, right? So so you need both, right? But uh, as we go into work and we think about what we expect our leaders to know, give them some grace, right? Give them some grace and check our own expectations. How strong are we if we were in that same position? And what are those gaps? Do we have gaps, or do we have strengths that could support that leader? Are there things that you can do to help shore up the blind sides of, you know, somebody that you report to? And can you do that in a with the right intention and the right heart, right? I don't want to use a ton of buzzwords because I hate buzzwords because they're so ill defined, right? There's always a ton of buzzwords going around, but nobody actually defines what the hell it means to the team and what the hell it means to the individual and why they should matter at all, right? And so I try really hard not to use too many buzzwords. Um, so that's what I got for you tonight. I hope that it leaves you encouraged. I hope that it leaves you inspired. I hope that it leaves you asking a few better questions of others, but more importantly, of yourself. Um, and yeah, so thanks for your time tonight. I appreciate you. I value this tremendously. It gives me an exceptional amount of energy just to be here. Yeah, so let me know. Shoot me a message. Continue shooting me messages or leave a comment on, something else you'd like to hear about or you'd like to dig into or double click on. So, again, have a great Wednesday evening. Love you guys. Take care.